Welcome to Comparative Law Session. I'm Adnan Mahmutovic, and in today's episode, I'll introduce you to 1. Basic definition of comparative law, 2. Historical development of comparative law, and 3. Why is it relevant to study comparative law at university today? So let's get started. Among various definitions of comparative law, I chose the one which I do believe describes the best what is the essence of comparative law today, and at the same time, it is an easy, simple, and understandable one, and that is comparative law is an academic discipline that involves the study of differences and similarities between various legal models, including the common law, the civil law, socialist law, various kinds of religious law models such as Islamic Sharia law, Jewish law, Hindu law, canon law, etc. Comparative law also involves the study of differences and similarities between various legal systems or legal systems of different countries. For instance, between Anglo-American legal system and Anglo-Saxon legal system, or between Anglo-American and mixed-made legal system, there is a difference between law models and the legal systems. For instance, Anglo-American legal system and Anglo-Saxon legal system are two different legal systems in two different countries, but they both belong to the same law model, which is a common law model. Before we continue on, let me to give you a little warning here. Be careful about regarding the terminology because terminology is quite rich in findings. With different authors, you will find different notions, different expressions. In addition to those mentioned, such as a legal model, legal system, you will find a legal family, even legal style, and many others. But don't worry. As long as you have it clear in front of your eyes, what is the meaning of those terms and what is comparable, what is not comparable, there won't be a problem for you to continue on with your research. Otherwise, I'm afraid that you will get confused and then you will get stuck in limbo, the situation which is the best to be described by using this old-fashioned phrase. You cannot compare between apples and oranges. When this phrase is used, it provokes the thought that the items are incomparable and as a result, ridiculous to compare. If you go to a library, for instance, and you get yourself a book about comparative law, it won't take too long for you to figure out to find out that what is the main aim of comparative law. And the main aim of comparative law is at illustrating how legal systems today are different or similar. For some authors exploring both differences and similarities, forms in a part a definition of comparative law, but you might be surprised to find that some authors have generally emphasized differences while others see similarities. Of course, there is a third group which have sought to strike a balance between observing and analyzing similarities and differences. There is a logical explanation for such diversity here, and that is all depends on conceptual framework, all depends on your goal. If your goal is to show that your own legal system is different from systems around, and you will try to emphasize differences. If your goal is to show the world and to yourself that your own legal system is not much different but very similar to other systems around, then you will try to emphasize similarities. So all depends on this specific perspective regarding the purpose of your research. Most of comparativists today, or most of comparative lawyers, agree on that comparative law is not a law in itself. It is not a positive legal system itself. It is not a body of rules and principles. For you who just started studying comparative law, this might be shocking. If comparative law is not a law in itself, if it is not a body of rules and principles, what is it? It is a specific method of law. It is a method. It is a method of law which describes, which analyzes, which compares between different legal systems. It is a way of looking at legal problems, legal institutions, and entire legal systems. By the use of this method, we can make some observations, we can gain insights, which won't be possible to be done to one who limits his study to the law of single country. Comparative law appears to be essential for many reasons today. First of all, it is an academic discipline. And there is academic curiosity here. We want to know about other legal systems in the world. But the greatest value, I would say, of comparative law is in understanding our own legal systems and then benefiting from benefiting from other legal systems by importing what we lack from them. That's why we say today that comparative law has gained in relevance, because it helps us to understand our own law and provides us solutions for legal issues which have become more and more, I would say, global today. And then here's the link, a very strong one, between comparative law and globalization. And that's why some authors say that that comparative law has become increasingly important in this trend towards globalization, increasingly important in this globalizing world. Comparison as a method is in the nature of all legal work. It is a fundamental element of legal research. But more importantly, I would say it is a crucial element of human thought. Also, comparison is essential in improving and maintaining communication between different legal systems. It is a method of intellectual exchange, I would say. It contributes very much to what is called legal engineering, when you try to apply different solutions into your own legal systems. Comparative law, I would say, is a field which does not serve only academic curiosity. There are some practical reasons why comparative law has become very important, increasingly important today. Other than providing a structured means of intellectual exchange, comparative law is also helpful in shaping foreign policies in different countries. But there are many other practical reasons as well. I will give you a simple example. If you are a businessman, for instance, you have some money in your pocket and you want to invest your money in certain country, you want to start up a business in certain country, before deciding to put which country you're going to put your money in, you will check up on the legal environment of business in that country. And then you will check up on the legal environment of business in another country, then in another country. So basically, what you will be doing is a comparative analysis between different legal systems in order to find out which one suits best to your business plans. I hope this was quite clear regarding my first point. My second point in today's episode is about the historical development of comparative law. If we look back to the history, we may conclude that from early times, some scholars and some researchers have made use of the comparative techniques. For instance, in ancient Greece, lawyers used the laws of other Greek cities or Greek city-states to decide cases. And the process of comparison was no different from the one we have today. In 6th century before current era, for instance, the famous Greek lawgiver Solon was faced with the task of compiling the laws of Athens and gathering together the laws of other Greek city-states. Romans were also interested in scientific knowledge of ancient Greece. In the 5th century before current era, they appointed commissioners before or prior to drafting their famous laws of the 12 tables. They appointed commissioners and they sent them to Athens, to Greece, to study legislative system of Athens, at that time known as the Solonian Constitution, but also to find out about the legislation of other Greek city-states. Not only Romans were interested in scientific knowledge of ancient Greeks, but also Arabs. Many scholars side with the opinion that what gave rise to intellectual tradition of falsafa in Islamic tradition was the so-called movement of translation from Greek philosophical writings. Arabs are well known as those who assimilated scientific knowledge of civilizations they had overrun. This includes not only ancient Greek, but also Persian, Indian, Roman, and Egyptian, etc. civilizations. This happened mostly during the period of time which is the best to be described as the Islamic Golden Age, from 8th to 13th century, the period under Abbasid dynasty or Abbasid Caliphate. This period was also called as the period of maturity and fiqh improvement, the period of Sunni arrangement, and most importantly, the period of the appearance of the imams of four great schools of thought in Sunni Islam: Hanafi school, Maliki school, Shafi school, and Hanbali school. On different note, the importance of comparative legal reasoning declined in measure in the process of development of jus commune on the continent of Europe. But beyond Europe, however, the process has continued to present days. Take an example of European colonizers. For instance, they had to be constantly compared with the local laws, which were never displaced in their entirety. This was possible because European authority at the time was largely persuasive in character and necessarily coexisted alongside local laws. The comparative law expression can be at earliest traced from the middle of 19th century. The idea became widespread through 19th and 20th century as comparative law itself came to be recognized as specific scientific discipline. This means that comparative law was not recognized as a specific or separate branch of legal science until that time, when it became clear that comparative legal reasoning deserved a systematic approach in order to increase understanding of foreign cultures, understanding of foreign legal systems. The 19th century saw the creation of various national comparative law associations. Some work was done in Germany in 1829, some in France in 1832, when a chair of comparative law was for the first time established at Collège de France. Also in 1846, when a chair of comparative criminal law was established in the University of Paris. But the main event happened in 1900 in Paris, when the first meeting of the First World Congress of Comparative Law was held. Basically, experts from all around the world, or all around Europe, better to say, gathered together to discuss their papers, to discuss the aims, the nature, and interest, the best interest of comparative law. They put forward four main goals of the conference. The first goal was to determine a methodology, how to analyze diverse legislation. The second goal was to define the role of comparative method in teaching laws. The third goal was to highlight the relevance of comparative law for national legislation and judicial interpretation and various kinds of international arrangements. And the fourth goal of the conference was to discuss mechanisms for making foreign laws more accessible. But the main achievement of this conference was in marking the arrival of the new scientific discipline, which is comparative law. By the end of 19th century and in the first half of 20th century, some scholars mostly saw comparative law as an instrument for improving domestic law and legal doctrine. By the end of 20th century, scholars saw comparative law as an instrument for harmonization of national laws with the European Union law. Now, I want to say something about Islamic law and comparative legal studies. First of all, there is a discipline, newly established discipline called comparative Islamic studies. Comparative Islamic studies as a discipline aims to advance research on Islam through comparative methods. Islamic law, according to the majority of scholars today, has become the subject of comparative legal study. But from a conservative Islamic perspective, comparative legal reasoning may be looked upon with a considerable reservation. In a world of national laws we live today, it became inevitable that the work of comparative lawyers would be looked at through the prism of national law. Many of the aims of comparative law have thus been expressed in terms of its contribution in different ways to national law. So if the sole aim of compassion is in informing and promoting law reform, which means in changing Islamic rules, then there is a little chance for a comparative study, according to the majority of Islamic scholars. This is because Islamic law or Islamic legal system, contrary to secular legal systems, is primarily a religion, a belief system. Islam means submitting to God's will, and Muslim scholars simply treat all others as inherently inferior, advertising their own law as divine legislation. And we know that divine laws are typically regarded as superior to man-made laws, sometimes due to an understanding that their source has resources beyond human knowledge and beyond human reason. Eventually, the compassion that may take place is aimed to promote and spread out the word of God, to spread out the word of Islam. And you will find a lot of Islamic scholars on YouTube or even satellite TV channels. They're doing exactly that by applying a comparative method. They're trying to spread out the word of Islam. It is important maybe to say just a couple of words about this specific relationship between Islamic law and non-Islamic law, or Islamic legal system and non-Islamic legal systems. It is not the case that non-Islamic legal systems inspired Islamic law or caused some changes in Islamic legal system, as much as Islamic legal system has influenced, has inspired non-Islamic legal systems, and particularly those in the West today. You will find that a number of national laws in the West were inspired by some Islamic rules. I can give you an example, but you will find many examples. For instance, in the literature, you may find very easily that some authors talk about the English trust was inspired by Islamic Waqf, but also many others as well. Comparativists employ different methods depending on the purpose of their endeavor. For this reason, one can distinguish between two types of research in comparative law. One is called macro comparison, the other is called micro comparison. Macro comparison compares the spirit and style of different legal systems or different legal models, while micro comparison, sorry, it's very close, the pronunciation. Micro comparison compares between different legal institutions within the same legal family. Because of the fact that macro comparison means observing the differences that exist between various legal systems in order to justify some innovations made in one country. Most of Islamic scholars are very much skeptical regarding a macro comparison, but they welcome micro comparison, which happens inside the Islamic legal system and which is today well known as a comparative fiqh. Basically, it is the comparison between four different legal schools in Sunni Islam: Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali. However, even taking into account the reasons given by Islamic scholars, we cannot deny the existence of some positive effects. Looking beyond national borders for sure gives us more possible solutions for social and legal problems, and if such solutions are not against the guiding principles of Quran and Sunnah, they may be applicable. What we're looking for here is not to copy paste the legal traditions of other countries, but to discuss innovative and practice tested solutions which might be applicable if they are not against, as I have said, the leading principles of Quran and Sunnah. They might be very helpful and applicable in the context of Islamic legal system. And my last point in today's session is titled as "Why is it relevant to study comparative law at the university today?" Hence, according to circumstances, there might be different aims and diverging reasons for studying different legal systems. There are both, I would say, theoretical and practical incentives for studying the legal systems of various nations. First, as I have said, there is academic curiosity. Comparative law is first and foremost academic discipline. We want to know how different legal systems function. But also, there is a practical interest here. From practical point of view, we live in globalizing world, and today globalization seems to have become a cliche of our times. In globalizing world, geographical limitations have lost much of their plausibility. Internationalization has opened up a large market for comparativists, for comparative lawyers today. This does not affect only the national national law, but also whatever is subject of legal regulation. National companies, for instance, are not only competing with each other anymore, but also with other similar international and multinational corporations. The same could be said to national universities. The globalization process, simply to say, requires the legal practitioners to be educated in such a way as to make it easy to move across jurisdictions, across specializations, and to move across employment opportunities. Legal practitioners will not necessarily have one and the same employer throughout their legal career. In fact, legal practitioners typically spend some time in general practice. They may work for the government or a national company for a while, and then also they do a stint with an international organization. So different working positions demand different sets of professional criteria and different attitudes. So if those young people are not educated to make it clear between different legal systems, how can you expect them to move across different jurisdictions or different specializations? So I will conclude this episode by saying that comparative law today is important to be studied at the university, and more and more we will see in the near future the importance of comparative law programs at our universities. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, stay well.